Hi, this is Steven, and in this video I'm going to show you how to model a basic hand, starting with this character that I started blocking out in a few other videos that I was working on. The first thing I wanted to point out is I am using, when I use the move tool, I'm actually, and I'm just going to press, I can press W to move on the move tool. I actually have symmetry on object X, and this character is set so that X is going across, Z is going back and forth, and Y is going up. So I'm using object symmetry, so when I modify one side, the other side I'm modifying. If you move a vertex, one thing to kind of point out is if I move a vertex around and I'm not in the object symmetry mode, it's not going to affect the other side, and then all of a sudden they're not going to be in sync. So what it's doing is it's working on a vertex level, and it's moving. If I move one vertex or one edge or a face, it's going to move it on the other side, but it's based on the position of the vertex, and it's got to be in precisely the same location as the other side, except negative on the X. So that way I can make sure if I'm going to work on one side, it's going to be affecting the other side. So if you ever pull it out of object symmetry, then the other side's not going to match. So there's a lot of variations on how to model a hand. I've seen a lot of tutorials and a lot of video tutorials, a lot of written tutorials about how to model a hand. A lot of different ways. Doesn't mean any way is necessarily better than the other. There are probably some that are more efficient than others. This is just going to be a basic hand that I will use with this basic character. It doesn't have a lot of detail, more of like a very simple that I don't need to get very close to, right? So I'm not going to put a lot of detail into it, but just enough to make it work for a hand. So a couple things that I'll point out. A lot of people will start blocking out the hand with just a simple cube and then start working from there. What I did is I extruded the arm, and I don't have the arm perfect yet, but what I did is extruded that and then kind of set it up so that it's going to work out for me in modeling. I wanted the faces up front where I'm going to extrude fingers out to be flat. And I also am going to extrude the thumb out here, and I wanted that to be flat. And a couple things I'll point out with this. If you right click and go to vertex mode, and you select a vertex and you press W on the keyboard, if you hold down V, it's going to snap to other vertices. So like this one, if I move it up and down, it's going to snap. So I'm going to move to the top view, which I put a image of this hand that shows sort of the dimensions, and I scaled it up and down. If you've never used free image planes, I have a tutorial that I walk through about using those and setting those up. So I just used an image plane, a free image plane, and then assigned this image to it just so I could kind of get the dimensions of the hand, and I matched it up to the size of the character. And I just did that by going down to the attribute editor, and when I have that selected, I mapped it to that image, and I set the height and width, just scaled it up. And what you can do is you can actually hold down, in this case I'm on a Mac, so I can hold down Command and get it to scale. If you're on a PC, you can hold down Control and do that. Just a little variation there. And then I scaled it up to the point. And what I did is I set up, I'm going to right click vertex. I set up all these vertices so they're right along where the furthest extent of one of the fingers join here, right? It's that webbing in between your fingers. I didn't move this back yet because I want it to be straight. But what you can do, let's say you have one of these vertices that's just off a little bit. You can hold down the V key and snap that to the other vert. So even this, if both of these are off, I can move this up. It'll snap to that one. But if I pull it this way, it's going to eventually snap to these. So I'm going to do the same thing here, right? And then I did the same thing here, but I'm going to snap this, make sure that these are snapped, just so they're straight. And this is going to help me when I'm extruding out faces. I don't have to do a lot of work for that. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to go to my front view. And if I hit F on the keyboard, since I'm in object symmetry, it's going to go and look at the entire thing. But I'm going to bring this up and bring it in here. And it's, you can already tell that I've sized up the hand pretty well. And this is where, you know, this base of the finger is going to start, right? And I can do the same thing here. If these aren't lined up, I can select it and hold down V on the keyboard. You know, if it's moved up here, I can hold down V and drag it down. The same thing here. If this is not aligned, I can hold down V and drag it up and just make sure these things are even and level. And I can also do that from, you know, the side view as well, you know, line them up. But that's the way I'm going to get this straight. If it's not straight to begin with, if you're not working from just a basic cube or you didn't get them straightened, when I start to do the extrude, it might get a little weird on you. So you have to kind of get that fixed up. It won't be the end of the world. It just have to be one of those things that you kind of fix up. Another tool that I want to point out, and I always do this with my modeling toolkit, is there's a custom shelf area down here at the bottom. If you haven't seen my video on modifying your shelf in the modeling toolkit, you can check that out, and you can add custom shelves. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to add this slide edge tool, and this can help you to line up certain edges. So if you go down to Mesh Tools, Slide Edge, and I hold down Command Shift. If you're on a PC, you can hold down Control and Shift, and all I have to do is middle mouse and click. And it's going to add it to whatever shelf I have active up here. See, it says Poly Modeling. I've added it to the end of the shelf here. And then what I'm going to do, the same trick, I'm going to hold down Command Shift, middle mouse, and I'm going to drag it down here to the custom shelf. You'll see it's gone from the shelf up here, and it adds it to this custom shelf. So now I have the ability to use this slide edge tool right from the shelf. How this tool works is I'm going to press Q on the keyboard, right click and go to edge. You can also select it up here in the modeling toolkit. This is the edge selection mode, vertex, edge, face. So I'm going to go to edge and I'm going to select these edges. So to kind of point this out, what I'm looking for is a pretty much equal distribution of the edges along this entire face, this front face. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want to get it pretty perfect. So when I extrude out the fingers, it's going to line up pretty well. They don't have to be perfectly square from top to bottom. And I have this middle edge, right? So what I'm going to end up doing is using this slide edge tool. And if you middle mouse and drag that edge, it's going to snap a little bit if you have some settings set properly, right? So I'm just going to slide it over here and I'm going to move it back. And I'll show you these settings that I've set up. Another cool thing about adding them down here is if you right click on top of it, you can edit the button or open it or edit the pop-up. But you can also just double click it. And when I double click it, you're going to see these options. I have snapping point set to 5, which is basically like 50%. If you think about like 10, that's, 50%, but it's going to snap to these. And then this snapping tolerance, setting it to 1, it's usually set to, something low. If you set it to 1, it's going to make sure it snaps to that, right? If you set this to 1, I'll show you what it does. And I middle mouse and drag it. You notice how it snaps here and snaps here. So that's 1, right? And then snaps there, snaps there, snaps there. So you can see it does it like at increments, right? So if I set it to 5, it's going to snap right there in the middle, right? And that's how you can line these up fairly equally. Close that options, right? That way I can middle mouse and drag and get it to be fairly centered, right? There we go. You can get that to line up. So if they aren't, again, it's not the worst thing in the world, but I try to get it to, be straight so I don't have to spend so much time messing with it to get these things lined up after I start extruding the fingers. So let me go to the top view again, and I put this little image in here so I can line up the fingers. And you'll notice that these are pretty much where in between each finger. Just so you can understand how I set up the geometry of this, I specifically set up the lines in my arm so that I had one edge going to the middle, edge going to each in between each finger. And then I'm going to work on the thumb as well, just so you realize how I've set this up. So it's very sort of standard in this way. And then the faces that I have in front of this are going to be extruded out for the fingers. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to pop over here to the perspective view, is I'm going to go over to edge, and I'm going to select these edges, and then I'm just going to click bevel. And what that's going to do is it's going to just give me some edges around this, right? It takes away from the middle edge and then adds two edges on the other side. And the reason I'm doing this is to create the junction in between each finger, right? So then what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to face mode. I'm going to select these faces. Don't worry if they're not straight yet or they're not square. It's okay. When I extrude, after I'm done extruding them, we'll mess with them and get them straight. So another kind of cool trick that you can do, rather than I can go over here and go to extrude and extrude them out. And I'll probably do that for this just because I need to add segments. But one kind of cool trick is if you hold down shift, you can actually drag and extrude, right? I want segments, so I'm going to go to the extrude tool and I'm going to extrude it out. And I can just go to thickness, and actually I'm going to go above, and I can go to thickness, and I'm just going to take that to the extent of this, the longest finger. And then I'm going to add a couple divisions. Now, what I want is I want at least a division for the knuckles, right? And I'm not going to worry about these down here yet, but each finger has two knuckles, right? So I want those divisions. But I also want a division in between each. So I'm going to add 6 divisions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then there's one at the end. So each one is going to have a segment for the knuckle, right? For each knuckle, and then a segment in between. And I'll work from there. We'll be adding more edge loops as we move along. Right? And I'm going to go back over to the perspective view. And right now it doesn't look like much. It just looks like some very odd fingers kind of sticking out. So I could taper them, but I'm going to worry about that a little bit later, right? So what I could also do is I can go here, now that I have them extruded out, go to Q and go to edge mode, or I could go to vertex mode, and I could start dragging all these in, right? So one kind of cool thing that you could do though, is if you go to your scale tool and then hold down D, it moves the pivot point. I'm going to move the pivot point all the way down here at the base. And now when I scale it, you're scaling it from the very end and everything is proportional, right? So I'm just going to scale that right down to the end of that. And now I'm going to go and do the same thing here. I select that. Notice the pivot point's still over here. So I'm going to again hold D, and I'm just going to slide this over till it gets to about right there. And then I'm going to scale this down until it reaches the end of the finger. And then I'm going to select this one. This one is the longest finger. So that's the middle finger is the longest finger. So I'm going to go over here to the index finger. I'm going to again hold down D, move this over. I guess I could still do it from there, but that's okay. And then I'm going to get that to that extent. Right? And then I can go here and hold down W or press W. So now what I need to do is I need to reset this pivot. And one way to do this is you just go to the Move tool and double click on it. You can then go over here to Edit Pivot and just reset it. And then I'm going to close that. And now it's centered back. And when I make new selections, it's going to go to the center of that selection. So I'm going to move that so it's right there at the knuckle. Each one of these, they should be fairly lined up. But this one's going to change. And I'm going to move this back a little bit. Move that one back. Move that one there. Select, move that one. Move that one right there about the base of the nail. Because it's going to be about where the center in that joint, that distal phalange, right? That's going to be about the center of that. So that one's going to be about right there. That one's going to be about right there. right now it doesn't matter if it's not perfect because we're going to fix it up later. All right, now I'm going to go back out to the perspective view, and then I'm going to select these faces, and I'm going to extrude out. So I'm going to press W on the keyboard, hold down Shift, and just extrude it right out because I don't need any other segments or any other options. And then I'm going to move this forward just a little bit, and then switch into my component mode for the vertices. And then I have a little area where the thumb's going to be extruded out. And then I'm going to go here to face mode, select these faces, and then I'm going to extrude again. And again, W on the keyboard, hold down Shift. And actually, here's a neat little trick as well. Right now, the manipulator is set to object mode. If I hold down W and just click and hold, you're going to see it's in the object mode. I could switch it to world, but they're pretty much the same at this point because the object and the world at this point are oriented the same. But I'm going to go over and go to component mode. And what that's going to do is it's going to orient my manipulator so that it's straight out of the faces, the normal angle of these faces. So now I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to extrude again. And then I'm going to extrude again. So, and if I pop over to my top view, I can see that I'm, extruding it out towards the end of the thumb here. And I can go here and go to these vertices and then pull that out a little bit. And I do want to add more segments. What I could do is I could keep extruding out. Each time I extrude out, I can add a new segment. But in this case, I'm just going to keep it right there. And I'm going to move this in so it fits more of that thumb. And I'm going to keep this here for right now, but I'm getting the basic idea of what's going on with the thumb here. All right? So I'm going to go back out to my perspective view. And now I can see I've sort of blocked out the hand, the very basic essence of the hand. Right? And I can start modifying at this point, but I also want to make sure that I have enough edge loops that I'm going to be working with. So I'm going to go to the multi-cut tool. I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to find out where I can put a couple edge loops here. And I can put one here, but you'll notice that when I do that, because I've got these little triangles here that I need to deal with, that it's not giving me it's not giving me a full edge loop. But I'm going to just go ahead and do that here. And then I'm going to go to the multi-cut tool again. I'm going to go to the multi-cut tool, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click over here, and it's going to connect those two together. And I'm going to do the same thing over here, and I'm going to click over here. So I've created another edge loop, even though it doesn't want to create one because right now I have triangles. But I'm going to deal with that later. The next thing that I want to do, go to Q on the keyboard, is I'm going to fix the thumb direction here. And how I'm going to do this, I'm going to right click, go to face. I can select these top faces, and if I hold down Shift and the period key, I expand that selection. Now I'm going to go to the move tool or the rotate tool. And again, what I'd already done is I held down E and I changed it to component mode. I can switch it back to object, but it's not going to give me the rotation that I want. I want the thumb to rotate this way. And then I can hold down Shift and the comma key, and it goes to the next segment. And then I can rotate that a little bit more. I'm going to press W on the keyboard, move this down a bit, give myself the proper angle that I'm looking for with the thumb, which is a little bit, not quite 90 degrees, but a little bit off center from the other fingers. So if you look at your own hand, and it takes a lot of effort to pull your thumb up, and get it flat. So it actually has a downward angle, and I'm going to work with that downward angle. So I'm going to go to vertex here, and I'm going to bring that down, that one at the top there. And then I can start lining these up if I want to, right? But I'm going to be working on this a little bit more on this side. But that starts giving me what I'm looking for. And I'm going to, again, go W. I'm just going to go to object mode so I can kind of bring that straight down. And then I can start lining these up just a little bit. Right? I'll bring these up just a little bit. Right? So I don't have to make it perfect yet. I'm just blocking it out. Don't get too carried away with the details at this point in time, because if you start to try to work on all the details without getting the blocking first, you're going to be dealing with a lot of, sort of a mess here in terms of what you want to create. And if you try to add more edge loops, it's not going to work out. So then what I'm going to end up doing, I'm going to right click, go to face. I'm going to delete these two faces. And then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to bring this one up. So I'm going to use the target weld tool. And what I'm going to do is drag from this vertex up to this vertex. And it brings those two together, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually use the multi-cut tool. And I'm going to put just one little vertex right there. And again, use the target weld. And I'm going to weld that to here. And then I'm going to do it again, multi-cut tool. I'm going to select right there, return, go to target weld, and bring that down. And what this is going to do is it's going to create like the webbing around your thumb. So one other thing that I need to do to make this all work is I need to go to the multi-cut tool and select that vertex and select this vertex and return. And now you'll see that I've been able to redirect some of these loops around. Now, what I will need to do is eventually get this working in a more organic way. But for now, I'm just going to move those so that I can see down here that that's a quad right there. And I'm going to move that in just a little bit. Right? So now I've got where if I go to the multi-cut tool and hold down Control, I can see that I'm building an edge loop in here. Right? So try it right there. Try it right there. So now I can see that I've got some edge loops going on. Right? Cool. All right. So now what I need to do is I'm going to start working on the fingers a little bit. And one concept that we got to figure out here is that I want to keep these quads all the way through. So I've got these little triangles that I'm going to have to deal with. But I also need another section or another segment, another edge loop going around the fingers. Now, when I create an edge loop with the multi-cut tool around here, you're going to see that it stops right there. Right? So I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, and that's going to allow me to snap it to the center. And the same thing here, same thing here, and the same thing here. Now what I could do at this point in time, I'm not worrying about the width of the fingers quite yet, but now at least I have the segments that I need to start rounding them out, right? And I can start, doing that here if I wanted to, but I'm going to work on a couple little loops to make sure this all works out. And so what I'm going to have to do is work on this so that the hand starts adding extra geometry as it moves further down, right? And the way that you can do that is to start subdividing. So I can go to the multi-cut tool, and I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to hold down Shift to go halfway in between each. And then here, 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 and here. And now I've created, a gateway or a path for this to follow. And then I'm going to take the multi-cut tool and again put a point right there and cut it halfway right there, and again halfway right here, right? And then right to the edge. And then I'm pressing return or enter to exit out of the tool. And then I'm going to select a vertex, press W on the keyboard. I'm going to hold Control and Shift, and what that's going to allow me to do is slide this along that edge right there. Or I could slide it along this edge, right? So it's just built to slide along edges. That's what those modifier keys are allowing me to do. So I'm just doing that so I can slide it right along the edge. And I can middle mouse and drag to do that, right? So select it, middle mouse and drag. I can also right click and drag, but middle mouse I could do it from anywhere, right? So I get those to kind of line up so that they're making a continuous loop around the edges and the outside of the fingers. So you can kind of see that it created this pathway, right? So not quite done yet, because I want to keep doing that a few times so that I can work out these, right? Now, what I could do is I could use the multi-cut tool, hold down shift, and I can go right there. And then I actually made that a quad, but I'm going to make it a little bit different, right? So then I'm going to take this one, select here, hold down shift so it's halfway in on that edge. And then I'm going to go here, 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 and here. Back to make another loop. And again, go to this point, hold down shift, go halfway. Again over here, actually hit return so it accepts that one. Then go to this point, hold down shift so it goes halfway, return. Now I can go back into the move tool, hold down shift and control, middle mouse and drag to get these to slide, right? And now I have, a nice pathway that I've added extra geometry throughout the hand to kind of loop onto the fingers, right? So the only thing I have to deal with here now are these triangles. And here's how I'm going to achieve that as well. So I'm just going to go to multi-cut, click the corner, hold down shift, halfway. I'm going to do it again. Corner, shift, halfway. Corner, shift, halfway. Corner, shift, halfway. Corner, shift, halfway. And then corner, shift, halfway. Okay, and then that sets up my structure. Q on the keyboard to get out of that tool. W to move. Control and shift, and I'm going to slide that along. Get some spacing here, right? And now what I can do is I can use the multi-cut tool, and I'm going to hold down Control and shift to pop that in the center, and then here to here, and then again here, again here, and from there to there, hit return, here to here, hit return, and I'm going to go look at the other side, and I still haven't dealt with that, but I'll deal with that kind of in the same way. There's some differences that I'll work on, right? So now I have some webbing around the fingers. I'm going to get this good distance going here, and I've got endless loops going on except for the bottom of the hand. So if I go to the multi-cut tool and I hold down Control, and then I do this, it's going all the way around. Now, one thing I just realized is there's an extra vertex right there, so I'm just going to select it and get rid of it. So if I can't delete it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the target weld and just drag it over here. So now they're both joined together. And now if I go to the multi-cut tool, hold down Control, now I've got an endless loop. And then I've got one there, and then I've got one here, right? So if I can keep adding edge loops to get more definition out of my fingers, right? Cool. So I'm going to add a couple edge loops here. And I'm going to again hold down Shift and Control. So when I add the edge loops, it's going in increments, right? So I just want to go to 1, and then I'm going to go over here. Whoop. There. And then now I can go to the top view and see that these are around the area where the thumb will bend right there, right? And I can kind of align these things up a little bit more, right? Get these kind of in a good general direction. Right? With the top of the hand pretty well done, I'm going to start working on the underside of the hand and sort of approach it in the same way or a similar way with the fingers. A couple things that I need to point out is if you look at your hand, there's a pad right here on the palm and a pad right here. And I'm going to work on those areas a little bit by moving some vertices around and then adding a bevel to them to help with define the pad. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and do the multi-cut tool. And again, go from here, hold down shift to go halfway, hold down shift to go halfway, and I'm going to come all the way over to here. There. And then hit return. And then I'm going to do the same thing here where I go here, and I'm going to go halfway here, halfway here, halfway here, and to there. Right? I could go a little further, but I'm going to keep it right there because I want to move some vertices around here to help with the palm. So again, then I have to go here to here. And then I'm making, quads out of the webbing around the hands or in between the fingers. Again, halfway there and halfway there. Again, just holding shift when I'm inserting that point to make sure it's halfway. It doesn't have to be exact, but I do that just to make sure. And then again, to move this along the edge, I hold down shift and control and middle mouse and drag that. And then that. And then that. And then I'm just going to connect this here, enter using this multi-cut tool. Right. And then I've got other work to do here to make it all work out. So here, shift and close that one. Shift go center, and there to close that one. And then I've got a quad there. I'm going to move this and move that. And then I'm going to come over here with the multi-cut tool again and halfway here and all the way to this edge. And then halfway here and all the way to this edge. Right? And now I'll have Q on the keyboard, sorry, to actually move that along that edge. And now I have interlocking fingers. So if I go to the multi-cut tool again and I hold down control, you'll see that I've got a loop that goes all the way around, right? So there's a loop, right? So that gives me the ability to create additional geometry if I need it, right? So I'm going to go to the Q on the keyboard, and then I can form out the pads here a little bit, just so I have the geometry to work with around the pads of the underneath the fingers in the palm, right? And I'm actually going to, this is going to move down because the fingers are going to move down, so I'll do some later adjustments for that as well, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to move it down a little bit, right, to form underneath the where the loops come around for the thumb. Just move it down a little bit, right? And then I'm going to move this a little bit to be the center, and I'm just going to move it here to be the center of this pad right here where the palm meets. And I'm going to move this over because it needs to accommodate that. So I'm kind of giving some room here for the pad on this side of the palm. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to make this kind of come in a little bit. Right? And so that's going to represent sort of the center of the palm. And I'm just going to bring this in just a little bit. Right? And then what I need to do first here before I start getting into the pad here is I need another edge loop around the thumb. So I've got one going this way, and I want one that's basically horizontal and then one vertical. So again, multi-cut tool, control, and then shift to snap it. And I kind of get it right there in the center, right? I've added an edge loop, and you'll notice that if you have it right, it's going to go all the way around the thumb here, right? And then I'm going to take this, I'm going to move this one over just a little bit more. I think I need to open up a little bit of space and have that come right down in the middle of that palm area there. Bring it up just a little bit. Bring this one over just a little bit. And then I'm going to grab these faces, that one, that one, that one, that one, and I'm going to bevel them, right? And now I'm going to have an area that I can work on for the palm there. And then I'm going to grab this one and this one, and this one and this one, and I'm going to bevel that, right? So now I have some areas there that I can actually add more edge loops if I needed to. And eventually I probably will to get more detail out of this. But I'm going to move these over a little bit. Now you'll notice that I've got some areas that I need to deal with here. And I've got some triangles that were created through beveling that I need to fix, right? There's a couple different ways that I can do this. And what I'm going to end up doing, go to the multi-cut tool, I'm going to just close that off so I have one continuous edge loop. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this off. Q on the keyboard, I'm going to get rid of this edge. I'm going to get rid of this edge, and then I'm going to take these and go from here to here. Go from here to here, right? Again, holding shift so that I make sure it goes about halfway. That way it just goes in the center. W on the keyboard, I can slide these edges away. I can move them out if I want to, right? And now I've got quads going all the way around. And so I'm going to do something similar here, where I'm going to slide this up, right? And then I'm going to use the multi-cut tool, go from here to here to here. Q on the keyboard, deselect that tool, go to edge, delete these two edges that were forming those triangles. And then I'm going to, again, multi-cut, go from this edge, similar to here, where I select, and then shift select so it's halfway. And again, click this corner right here, and then select halfway. And then I'm going to go to vertex again, and then slide those up. And now I've got quads going all around those pads. Now I do want to form them out so they're a little bit more rounded, so I can start to move these around this way. These are sort of the refining points of, you know, modeling it out. Right, so at least I have the pads to work from. And then move that in a little bit. Move that in a little bit. Right, I can start forming these pads out. And this is probably going to be coming down a little bit. It's not as high as this one. So I'm going to grab all these and move them down. Let's see if I can slide it down. There we go. It spreads it out just a little bit. Select that. And then let's select this one. Right, now I'm just kind of going to be forming out sort of the shape of the hand a little bit. Right, and it can bring this up. Now I can start getting it to look a little more rounded, right? And get these pads to look proper. Bring that up just a little bit. Don't worry about at first if it doesn't feel like you're getting enough definition, because you can add edge loop. So I can just go into the multi-cut and add edge loops around these areas. Or I could, you know, use the multi-cut tool and go around the outside, right? I can even add another edge loop right here if I want, right, to go all the way around. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've connected all those edge loops. And now I know that I've I've made a complete loop around here so I can add edge loops all the way around. You know, I can go in here and I can actually select all these faces, and I can bevel it again and get another edge loop all the way around. So it's just a way for you to continue making improvements by just making sure if it loops all the way around. And I missed a triangle here, right? And there's one there. So I can deal with it in much the same way. Or in this case, I could go to the multi-cut tool and just hold the shift, and it closes that off and makes that quad. Oop. Select that, W on the keyboard, slide it along. So I can just add a quad in there just by doing that, because I had two triangles right there kind of at the edge of the palm. So then I can bring these in, right? Now the other thing you can do is you can use this soft mod tool, right, to get a little bit more, you know, fall off if I don't want to just keep pulling individual vertices in. If you press B on the keyboard and then you select a vertex or an edge, you're going to see that it's got this area around it that it's being affected. So if I move this up, you're going to see everything else moves up as well, but falling off as it gets out of this area of influence. If you hold down B on the keyboard, you can scale up and down the amount of influence that will have. So if you don't want a lot moving around it, or if you do want, you can modify how far it's going out, right? And then I can move this in and out kind of in a nice organic way, right? So let's select that one, move that up. Right, move this up just a little bit, move this down, right? So now I can start doing that. So as you're kind of doing that, I'll show you how now I start to get the fingers to look a little bit more organic, like they're rounded fingers. And really all I'm doing is I'm going to select some of these edges. Let me press B again to get out of the soft select tool. And I'm going to select here, shift, double click. So I'm just, you know, holding down shift to add it to the selection, and then holding down shift and double clicking to get that entire loop, or to that entire edge. And I can go to each one individually, but I'm going to press R on the keyboard for scale. And I'm going to bring this down a bit. Right, and then I'm going to bring it, I'll actually bring the other edges out. So now I'm going to go to this one, shift, double click, shift, double click, whoop. Yeah, and now I want to turn those off. I don't want to scale those out. So again, R on the keyboard for scale, and then I bring that down a little bit, kind of get a nice look for the roundness of the finger. Shift, double click, select here, that edge, shift, double click, and now I'm going to scale that out a little bit, get a little bit more roundness of the finger. And I'm just going to work on this one because then you can apply that same principle to all the others, right? And now I'm going to go to vertex here, Q on the keyboard so I don't accidentally move it, and then move this in just a little bit, get a roundness to the front of the finger, and I'll have to add more edge loops to really make it rounded, and then bring these in a bit, you know, taper it just a little bit. And I think yep. And now I can scale that in just a little bit and bring this down. There we go. Now, again, I can add a lot more details later and further refine this, but for now I think that's a pretty good look. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab by edges. So this is where the knuckle is, and here's in between the knuckle. So I'm just going to scale that in just a little bit. Scale this one in just a little bit, right? And so now I should have So I'm going to go to my top view and make sure. So this one I need to scale out because that's where the knuckle is. This one I'm going to scale in just a little bit. And now I have, and I chose the wrong one. So I'm going to scale this out just a little bit. And then this one, that one's in the middle. That one's a knuckle. So this one I'm going to bring in just a little bit. This one I'm just going to bring in just a little bit. Right? And then this one just a little bit because it's tapering, right? And then I can add a few more edge loops, multi-cut tool, hold down Control, and then I'm going to press Shift so it will move in increments, right? So I'm going to just put one right about right there. It's about, mine is snapping about 2 out, and then snap those in place, snap that one in place, snap that one in place. Right, now I'm going to go back out here. I will need some edge loops here too, but I'm going to work on these first, and you can kind of apply the same kind of principle, right? And again, they don't have to be perfect, but what I'm going to end up doing is kind of scaling these up a little bit, you know, get a little bit more definition around the knuckles, right? I can scale this one up just a little bit. Scale this one up. So you get that. And then what I'm going to do is I need these little pads on top of, your knuckles. And I'm going to do that by, again, using the bevel tool. So I'm going to go to Face, select these 4 faces, and bevel, right? Select these 4 faces and bevel. And now you're going to see that I've got some knuckles. Now I can do the same thing here and bevel, and now I have an area where I can make my nail. And if you go to the top view, go to vertex, right? I'm going to grab all these. And again, I've been working in object symmetry, so I'm building the hand on the other side at the same time, right? So when I press F on the keyboard, it just moves that. So I'm going to move this nail bed just forward just a little bit. Right, so it's just about right there, and then I can move this forward just a little bit, kind of shape out the nail. Oh. There we go. And now I can spend a little bit more time redefining this, but I also want an edge loop over here, so I'm going to do that, snap it, and then if you look right here, when I do this, you're going to see it go through everything because I created an edge loop for it. Made everything quad so it could easily make an edge loop. And then I'm going to go to Edge. This one, scale them all up at the same time. I just want to grab that, scale that up just a little bit, kind of make that where, and technically this knuckle is back behind here, so it's back over here, but we're gonna use this webbing here to kind of represent where that's happening. So I'm gonna select these, go up underneath, Q on the keyboard, W for move, and then I can kind of move that forward a little bit. And the same thing here. So then I want to make sure, once I get that formed, I want to make sure that I'm sort of following my little template here with this hand so that I'm sort of following along some of the contours and the distances and all. So I'm going to move these back a bit just to kind of represent where that knuckle should be. Just grab all those and move that back, right? And then grab all these and move those back just a little bit. And actually this is too far, so I'm going to go about right there. Right, now I've got pretty much a good working finger for right now, and I can add a little bit more definition as I move along and add more edge loops, and especially where the joints are going to bend, because the joints are technically back in here, right? And then I'm going to do another quick little trick here I've got these pads, and again, I need to do a lot of modification to get this into the right shape. Now for the webbing in here in between the thumb and the index finger, I need to add a little more geometry so that it folds and can bend. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the multi-cut tool again, and I'm going to go from this corner somewhere in here. So I'm splitting this up a little bit, and I don't need to hold shift because I don't need it in the center. I'm just going to bring it over here, bring this one here, and then go into this corner with that. And then go right there. Okay, now once I have that, I'm going to again go up in here, go down here. So I'm kind of repeating a similar process that I created when I was adding geometry in the webbing in between the fingers, right? So now I have, what I'm going to end up having here is two triangles. Trying to get in here so you can see it. These three quads, a triangle here, and a quad. So just like the webbing in the fingers, I'm going to go here about halfway, and I'm just holding down shift again to snap it. Q on the keyboard, go to vertex mode, W, slide it along the edge, right? And then I'm going to go down here, do the same thing, multi-cut tool, halfway, then Q on the keyboard, go to vertex mode, W on the keyboard, and then move those in just a little bit, right? And now I'm going to have some webbing and some edge loops along that little area in the webbing area to kind of work with, right? So if I add another loop in there, you're going to see right here, it's looping all the way around, right? So I can add further loops to get there. So you can also see that, through the middle here, I have another edge loop to improve, the geometry and add more density in the geometry. But this is pretty much the basic hand. Now you just have to go through and manipulate vertices or shape it in using multiple tools like the soft mod tool. And looking at it right here, I noticed when I'm looking right here, I have a quad here, but it's terminating. So when you find things like this, I can fix these things, right? So you notice that I've also got something happening right here where there's no geometry coming in. This is not made a correct quad. So I'm going to fix this by doing that. And then I'm going to go from here to here to create this loop around here. And I'm going to go to edge mode. So you have to kind of look around and see, where you've created some interesting geometry and go around and sort of fix it up. Make sure that you don't have a bunch of, these triangles floating around. And so then I've got another triangle there, but I also can split it right here because this has 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I can then split this way. Q on a keyboard, go to edge mode, and I can delete that edge. And now I've created this quad right here. So I'm going to slide this up over this edge, right? And then I've got this edge here, and I can bring this edge up. So, and then I can kind of continue working with the rest of the thumb there. And then just clean up a lot of these edge loops so that they're kind of nice and, forming a nice circle around things, right? And then continue to work in these areas where it needs additional modification, right? So again, I can, slide these points up so that they're following along the proper, the proper edge, right? So I like using that. One other thing to note is if you find an edge loop, if you inserted an edge loop, let's insert one right here, and you realize that I didn't want that, or for whatever reason, I need to make some changes before I get it working, right? And you can kind of see that, it didn't kind of complete. I can either finish that up, right? Or if I want to, I could go ahead and delete that entire edge loop. Now, a lot of people will go in here and double click the edge and it'll select the entire edge loop. And if they just press delete, it'll delete the edge loop. If I just press delete, it'll delete the edge loop. But the problem with that is it'll leave behind vertices, right? That are just sort of hanging out there. So the better way, I'm going to undo that until I get the edge loop back. So a better way to do it is if you have the entire edge loop selected, hold down Control and press the delete or backspace key, and it'll get rid of all the vertices that are attached to it. So I can just kind of completely remove it, right? And then what I can do is, then kind of figure out another way to make an edge loop around there. But that pretty much should get you started on modeling out a basic hand. I still need to finish all the features and get these set up and, kind of follow my same template here with this index finger for the middle finger, the ring finger, and the pinky. And then add more definition in the thumb. But hopefully that gets you started, and then I can go through here and actually modify some of these other points. I can move these back a little bit to kind of make sure that there's room for, the fingers. And then I need to make sure that, I want to be over here, that I move all this back where the fingers are to get them to align back with where that finger would start from. And I want to make sure that these don't cross over. So I can kind of select them and then, get everything to kind of line up properly, right? So I can kind of move that back and move this one back. And then, as long as I'm just sort of moving, I move the whole thing, but I probably should have just moved, because that was lined up, I probably should have just moved all this rather than moving that, right? Get all this to kind of line up properly, and then move all this to get it to line up properly, right? And the same thing here, can just kind of move all that back. And then I could probably move that over just because this is going to be, a little bit thicker in here, and then I'm going to modify that. But then just kind of go up and make sure you're following along and fixing up the fingers the way that I did with the first one, and then work on the thumb in pretty much the same way. Okay? So hopefully this helps. And again, this was one method to creating a simple hand. There are multiple methods out there, and you have to choose which one works best for you. So I hope this was helpful.